Hi. Thanks for joining in. I am going to be working on a botanical piece today. I have here this painting in the works. It's another butterfly and botanical painting. And this is called, the species it's a California sister. The Latin name is Aesculus californica. I might be mispronouncing that completely. But it is a butterfly that has a native range within my area here in California and up through Portland as well. Basically anywhere that there are live oaks, because they rely upon live oaks for both their caterpillars as well as for the adults to munch on leaves and things. So they are very reliant on live oaks, and we have lots and lots of these here in Oakland. This is in fact from a oak weed, we'll call it that has sprung up in my front yard and is now about a 20-foot tall tree. So I think it's there permanently at this point. But I'm always finding little oak saplings that are springing up in random parts of my garden because squirrels will take these acorns and bury them and forget about them. I find them even in my potted plants frequently. So I managed to snip a few branches from my front yard oak tree, live oak. They also use another species of oak called, what is it called? I can't remember the name of it, but it is a species of oak that is more often, I think, in Oregon. So here's the thing going into this is that I have references for my coast live oak, but I don't have references for things like that other oak species or these berries, although I've seen these when I've gone hiking. It's not the right season for them right now, and the flowers as well. So when I do botanical pieces like this, I have to sometimes use a combination of finding my own references as well as looking things up on the internet and figuring out how the plants are structured and such. One of the biggest things I find that's hard to determine when I don't have a species specimen in front of me is determining the size, because a lot of times I'm doing things one-to-one. So these are the same size as the actual thing here. You can see the oak leaves there that I've started painting are the same size. And so is everything else in this painting. So it's all supposed to be in the right ratio, and that can be tricky when I don't actually have a thing in front of me. And when you look at pictures online, it's really hard to tell. So you can find some good references online, but the hard part is determining the size of things. And that is where things like herbariums come in really useful. So several institutions have herbarium collections, and these are collections of dried and pressed plants that are kept in a sort of library storage. And I visited the one in the Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, it's a neat place. If you've ever been in the Bay Area or lived in the Bay Area, I'm sure you know what it is, but for those of you who are not from around here, the Academy of Sciences is I think it's actually a research facility, but is open to the public in general as a sort of science and exploratory place for kids. It's a really neat place to go. And so they have this combination of things going on there. So they actually do have research and study that happens there as well. And I got a chance to visit their herbarium once as a little field trip with the Botanical Artists Society. They got us in there to take a look. And it basically is this enormous library stacks type of place. And inside all these file cabinets are flowers and leaves and plants that people have sent them from all over the world. Let me zoom in closer here because I'm doing a lot of really fine detail work. And you won't be able to see anything if I'm not zoomed in. Oops, where did my light go? So the herbarium, what was I talking about? Yeah. I think that's a good spot. So the herbarium is this amazing collection of all these plants that people from all over the world send to the Academy of Sciences or to any of these other places that have herbariums. And they are used for people who are studying the plants. Because when you have the pressed plant, even though it's dry, you're not going to be able to see what the colors are, but you can see the structure very clearly. When you see a photograph of oak leaves online, it's going to look like this big mess like this. But what I need to look at when I'm doing a botanical painting is exactly how the leaves come off of the stem, so they seem to be on alternating sides of the stems, these branches, and you can see the tiny little buds of other branches that can spring out from between leaves. So think little details like that, and the way the leaves curve, that you can't see some of this stuff when you're just looking at a still photograph. But herbariums kind of give you a much more flattened and structural look at how a plant grows, and so from that I am able to create botanical paintings that are much more scientific and true to life. And the other thing about herbarium collections, and so I had that one chance where I did get to go visit the Academy of Sciences, but there are a lot of organizations that have their herbariums available online. So that was the other thing I want to mention. And I was looking for this. I looked at a herbarium collection from UC Berkeley, where they have the pressed specimen photographs, and they also have line drawings in ink that have been done that show you the exact size of all the components of a plant. And so that's super useful for doing something like this, because that really lets me see how all the components are and what their sizes are, and I can then properly draw my version of them, even though I have, in some cases, never laid eyes on the specific plant. Now, if possible, I do like to have the specific plant in front of me, but it's not always the case. That can happen. I did a book of herbs for Llewellyn. Well, I did the illustrations for them. I didn't write the book, but I had to do illustrations for about 30 different herbs and plants. And most of the herbs I was able to find from my own garden, or even from the herb garden collection at local botanical garden, which was really useful for this project. But one of the main issues I ran up against when I was doing that project was they had me doing the pieces in the wintertime. And a lot of the drawings that they wanted me to do had flowers, and I needed to be able to paint flowers that were on the plants. And there's just no way that was going to happen in the wintertime, because even having a lot of those herbs in my own herb garden, some of them were about ready to die at that point, since it was middle of the winter. This was in December. So I did have to rely greatly on online resources in order to get the full look at some of these plants. So these are some little Coast Live Oak acorns. And while I don't have a full-sized one in front of me, I only have these little shrimpy ones because, again, this is not the right season for it. Seasons don't always cooperate with what I actually want to paint. But even having this little shrimpy acorn is better than none, because I can use it to study how the acorn cap looks and really take in the details of that. So even this little shrimpy thing is better than nothing. But the leaves are definitely useful on this little branch clipping that I've got, because I'm going to be needing to paint some of those very soon after I finish these acorns. Okay, so if anyone has any questions to ask me, it doesn't even have to be related to this painting, anything at all, feel free to shoot them over the chat. I have been working on this piece, so I sketched it out last night and I started painting it this morning, and I've kind of been on and off today. I did go for a hike for like an hour and a half in the middle of the day with my daughter, because she was starting to get into a media funk staring at a screen. So I decided to drag her out for a bit of a walk, and we went down into our local little creek area and hopped around on rocks for a while. Hung out with these same oak trees. But yeah, that kind of happened, bisected my day. So I guess I've been working on this for maybe like 4 or 5 hours at most, but you can see how little of it I've painted in that time. And these botanical pieces take a lot longer actually than my fantasy or more fantastical type paintings, because a lot of it is done, as you are seeing here, with this teeny tiny brush and these teeny tiny strokes. And lots of glazes and layers, and so it's a very slow process, but I really enjoy it. And it kind of takes a different frame of mind than when I'm working on my fantastical stuff, because, well, for one, I am using references heavily, which I don't use for my fantastical work almost at all. So the challenge with those pieces, with the fantastical stuff, is the imaginative whole process aspects of it. Whereas for this, it's the recreation of exact colors and shapes and structures. So it's a very technical process and method of working. Although I'm not nearly as methodical as some of the other botanical artists I know. I first started down botanical art path by taking a few classes at the Botanical Garden from a local artist over here named Catherine Waters. She's very involved in the local chapter of the Botanical Artists Society. But yeah, the way she teaches doing botanical art is very, very methodical every step of the way, where and I see lots of botanical artists working this way, where you swatch out all the colors that you're going to be using and you write down exactly how you arrive at certain mixtures of colors and what glazes you're going to use on top of each element, so that you end up, before you even begin painting onto your final surface, you have this whole laid out chart of exactly how you're going to attain any color that's going to be used in your piece. And I guess I've done that before, but I'm a little bit more impulsive about how I do my coloration. And I feel like I've worked with watercolors long enough that I mostly have a very intuitive sense of how the colors mix and how to get certain results. And so I didn't feel as necessary to map it all out that way, the way a lot of other botanical painters do. And I could definitely see the benefits of doing that, because there are times where I do something and then I completely forget how I arrived at a certain color mixture, and then I have to just kind of fudge it. But for the most part, I can recreate colors pretty well that I've done in the past, and the sequence of layering and that to arrive at a certain final look. Someone's asking me if I finished the mermaid piece. I finished the painting portion of it, yeah. I have some ideas for the framing of that piece, but I'm not quite ready to dive into that yet, so it's been temporarily put aside. And I've been working on a couple of botanical pieces in the meantime instead. But I'm not positive yet, but I think that mermaid piece might be part of one of the upcoming shows at a gallery that I will have in the next few months. But sometimes it takes me a while to figure out what exactly the theme is that I'm going to do for a gallery show, so I don't know if pieces are going to be a part of it until I get going on more of them, and then once I have a critical mass of paintings, then I can sort of whittle them down and say, oh yeah, this piece is going to be part of the show and this one's not. So for now, the mermaid piece is kind of set aside, and that was, letting you guys see it was kind of like a little sneak preview of it. Normally I keep pieces that I'm not sure of the final status of it secret. I love doing these little acorn caps. Marla's asking how I like Rosemary and Company brushes, because that's what this is here. This is Rosemary and Company. Klinsky Sable. I really like them for my botanical artwork, and for the very fine little detailed type stuff that you see me doing in this piece, where I'm just kind of skimming a little tiny bit with the tip of this very pointed brush. But yeah, those are kind of my favorite for this amount of detailed control work. And I get those online. I think they're a UK company. decide for this acorn, this next one, if I want to make it more green or more of a aged brown like the others. I think I'm going to go for brown because I have some big green ones that are going to be happening on the other side of this painting. Oh, actually, though, I do want an initial. No, that's not green enough. I want this underlayer. There we go. I want this underlayer of a greenish tone initially, because as the acorn ages, it turns brown, but sort of the base tone of it is this muted mossy green color. I don't have any of them in front of me, but I have reference photos that I'm using of acorns, and I've definitely seen my share of these in plenty. My daughter loves to collect buckets fulls of them in the fall, just for fun, and then dump them all back out again. She just likes collecting them when we go hiking. So I start with a glaze like that usually, and then I let it dry, and then I start painting dry brush details in. Now these leaves, you can see I've already started with a little bit of a glaze of color on them as their base layer. And you might note that strangely I decided to use blue as the base layer for the top side of these leaves. Whereas the underside I've used that more pale green color, because when I look at these, the light in the lightest part of the leaves, the highlights, feel more cool toned to me versus the warmer green, lemony green tones that are on the undersides of the leaves. So as a initial base layer, I started with a pale blue glaze. Now, let me show you this. Let me get that acorn to dry. So, well, there's like a giant acorn reference that I'm looking at. So this was a useful image that I found on Google of several different oak species. So I could see that my coast live oak over here is actually very similar size to this one. What is that one called? Oh, it's too fuzzy to see. But that's the other oak species that I'm going to be painting in this piece. But I can see from there the relative size, and so that's really useful for me. Lots of acorn pictures and leaf pictures. These are flowers of the oak. This is a very useful shot also to see the top and the underside of that secondary oak species. And I was trying to find the herbarium picture to show you. Here's the herbarium picture. But this is for those little red berries, and you can see it shows me the relative size of everything. It's all the measurements are there. So this is from the California, what is it called? The Jepson herbarium, Jepson herbarium. And you can go there and you can just type in the scientific name of any plant. And if you don't know the scientific name, it's easy enough to find. You just type in the common name, scientific name in Google, and it will show you what it is. But you can look up any plant species, and if they have it in their catalog, then you can see all the information that they have about it, which can be really useful. Anyway, back to these acorns here. That's right, I was going to make that one more of the russet tones. Redwin Sage Art says Rosemary and Company is a UK company and their brushes are handmade, very good quality and great shipping if you order directly from them. Yes, that's what I've always done. I've ordered directly from. I don't know if you can even order anywhere else. LMAXZ, what colors am I using for that mossy green? That is a Roman Sesmal color, and it is his Aquarius green, but I'm also using a little bit of the olive green light. Here, I'll type out the name of that brand because it's kind of a tricky one also. The Aquarius green is gorgeously granulating also. Not something that you can appreciate in a piece like this much, but for some of my looser work, it is really pretty to use. So I'm doing these very gradual darkening of these striations on the acorns because each acorn has a little bit of coloration shift that goes along these vertical growth lines. And so as I'm shading the acorn, I move my brush along those same lines so that I can get a 2-for-1 of shading and coloration as well as textural pattern. And I leave this area right there open as highlight. Now Marla is saying that Jackson's also carries the Rosemary and Company brushes. Thanks for that info. And then I'm doing a light glaze. This is a quinacridone orangey tone color. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's a quinacridone, Daniel Smith. And the glaze softens the lines of the shading that I did a little bit and helps blend everything. But it doesn't, I don't want to get rid of it entirely, so I have to use a very light hand. And a little bit of dark shading over here just underneath the cap. So yeah, as I said before, this is a very slow painting process. Quinacridone burnt orange. Yes, that is correct, Elmac. Thanks for jogging my memory on that. I'm so bad with remembering names of all this stuff. I'm always amazed at the people who not only remember the names, but the exact pigment numbers, because that all completely slips through my brain. Like, I read it and then I instantly forget. All I can say is, ooh, I like that color. Art of Gold says, I introduced them to Daniel Smith watercolor, and now it's become somewhat of an addiction. Yeah, they're fun. I especially like their Primatech stuff. Which ones are your favorites? Anthea, no, this is not a number 1. This is a number 0. And no problem. No one asked that yet, and I didn't mention. But here, let me show you again. It's, where's it? There it is. Rosemary and Company, number 0. Teeny tiny brush. Now the acorn cap has these little, they look like little scales on him. And in fact, when I started painting one of the other ones here, I was thinking, oh, this is kind of like painting mermaid scales. And this is where having my little sample acorn in front of me is really helpful, because I can squint at it and look at this tiny little detail of how the acorn cap is structured a lot better than seeing photographs of it. So I start with outlining those little scales very, very lightly. And then I can go back and shade them. As I said, kind of the same way I do mermaid scales, except on a teeny tiny miniature scale version. I have done some pieces where I proportionally scaled things up to like 2 times the size of the real thing. But for this particular piece, and for what I think is going to become a series of butterfly and botanical pieces, I'm planning to have everything on a 1-to-1 scale with the reality. Marla says that Daniel Smith neutral tint mixed with nickel azo yellow makes a lovely olive green. Ooh, I could try that right now. Let me see. And grab a different brush here for mixing stuff. Okay, I have some neutral tint over here. That one is neutral tint. and some nickel azo yellow. I believe I have that here. I think some more of the yellow. Oh yeah, that's actually a pretty similar olivey tone as what I'm using on the oak leaves. Actually, that is a very nice match for the oak leaves. Thank you for that tip. Yeah, I might use that now for the base layer of the oak leaves. Do you like the zoomed out view over here, or should I zoom back in? Zoom out this way you can see the colors and mixing that I do, but with such tiny detail work, it might be a little bit harder to see that portion. And just like the acorn body, I am now glazing some of my neutral tint and nickel azo onto the cap of this acorn to blend and shade a little bit of those little scales that I painted so that they are a little bit more smooth and blurred over there. All right, I'll zoom in again. Yeah, with such fine work, it's hard to show you both the mixing as well as what I'm actually painting. So while the fantastical stuff is a lot faster than my botanical, I do find also that doing the botanical stuff really helps my other work because I end up using a lot of these elements that I paint here with such attention to detail in my other work as well. But I'm a little bit more loose and free with those because I'm not having to adhere to any sort of scientific accuracy if I don't want to on those paintings. So it's nice to have it. Doing this sort of bakes in the knowledge of all the elements that I'm painting here into my head so that it becomes part of my repertoire of things that I am able to paint without reference after I do this. Because I become so intimately familiar with the tiny details and aspects of these. You know, like after I do monarch butterflies for a scientific poster, I'm able to just draw monarch butterfly wing patterns in my sleep. And they can make appearances in my other artwork whenever I need. So I find doing stuff like this is just helpful overall. It's a little bit like doing figure drawing, you know? When you do figure drawing, you become familiar with the human body and how everything is structured and put together. And then you are able to play around and mess with that stuff when you are doing paintings that don't involve a live model in front of you. And same as this, it's kind of baking in the visuals and the information into your head via this mechanical reinforcement of your memory. Siridwin saying that you like my holder. Yeah, I just, these are laser cut from pieces of acrylic, and I just kind of glued them together. It's a self-made thing. Apparently a live session with me is not complete without some excited barking from my neighbor's dogs. Oh, I've been having this, I had this bird, or I still have this bird, that has been singing his heart out at top volume and so exuberantly all night long. for 2 weeks now, I think it's been. He gets really, really noisy at around 2 a.m. to maybe 4 a.m. or so. Okay, so not all night long, but interrupting the middle of the night in a really obnoxious way. And it took me a while to find out what I was hearing, and it turns out it's a northern mockingbird. And they are known for doing this. They're the male birds, when they are seeking some female companionship in the springtime, will sing in the middle of the night, and it's really obvious when you hear them, because you go, okay, that is a bird. Or I guess sometimes maybe it might sound like an alarm clock or a car alarm or a microwave beeping, because they're mockingbirds and they can imitate all these different sounds. But they will just switch from one to the next in this quick succession. It's kind of funny when you hear them. But they're very loud, and it's very obviously a daytime kind of bird sound. But it's so bizarre to hear it at 3 a.m. at night when it's otherwise completely quiet. And it took me a while to figure out what I was hearing, because I was like, what is going on with that? And my parents finally enlightened me, because they also have one of these outside of their house currently, who has been driving them insane. So once they started complaining about it, and they knew it was a mockingbird. I don't know how they knew, but they knew. Once they started complaining about it, I connected the dots and realized, oh, I've got a mockingbird outside my house too. But yeah, there's no mistaking it for a nighttime bird. Like you hear it and you go, nope, that is not an owl. That is most definitely something else. And I haven't been able to find anything about why they sing at night. I think the only thing I was able to dig up was that there's a lot of sound pollution in the world now. And so as a way of adapting to that and ensuring that they're actually heard, these poor male mockingbirds have decided to take on the evening hours so that they don't have to compete with the lawnmowers and leaf blowers and everything else that we make lots of noises with. I'm sure the animal world is just as annoyed at how loud we are in the daytime. They go, we can't hear each other because you are all making so much noise. So yeah, that was the only sort of explanation I was able to find for why mockingbirds do that. But it sort of doesn't explain why mockingbirds are the only ones that do that. Then you'd think that if that was the reason, that all sorts of birds would be squawking away in the middle of the night. Anthea, this is not a pen. This is a watercolor brush. Well, it is a paintbrush. I'm using watercolors. I have people assuming I'm doing colored pencil or a pen frequently because they see this crazy painstaking way I am working. But no, this is a paintbrush, and I'm using paints. Mostly Daniel Smith right now. A few other random ones for some of the colors. So I can see on the inside of this acorn cap there's a little bit of a rough lip as well. Yeah, I hope that mockingbird finds a mate soon. Because it is really loud and it is right outside my window. I heard it again. I thought that he had stopped finally, but I heard him again last night at, it must have been like 4 a.m. I think. He kept me up for a while. But from what I hear, it's not supposed to last for very long. They do this for a while, and then either they give up or they find a sweetie. We're getting down towards the end of our hour. There's like 10 more minutes. Time's going really fast for me. I don't know about the rest of you. But if you have any more questions for me before the end of our session today, feel free to drop them in the chat. Or if you think of something later, you can always keep it in mind for the next time. I've been doing Mondays, but I'm not quite sure if I'll stick to this evening time slot or if I might do it earlier. I was doing it in the past weeks at around 10 a.m. Or, no, I was doing it at 1 p.m. That's right, Pacific time. So I'm not sure the exact time for it yet, but it will be next Monday again, is the next scheduled time that I have in mind for another live streaming session. Hud's Online Art asks, has the pandemic affected my painting style? It has not affected my painting style, but it's definitely affected how much I'm painting and maybe what types of projects I'm working on. I haven't done as many large-scale paintings as I usually do, mostly because I have trouble kind of getting into the right frame of mind for it. And I hadn't been doing too many botanical pieces actually for a while now. I think before the recent spate of botanical paintings that I've been doing, I did one succulent and I did another butterfly piece like this. But before that, I think it's been like a year or even two since I've done any big botanical pieces. And I hadn't been really feeling those for a while, but right now I'm kind of getting into the mode for them again. I think because there's much more of a mechanical and technical aspect to them, and I'm finding that an easier thing for my mind to wrap around. When there's so many distractions around me at home and so much that I'm worrying about and so much that I'm thinking about, having artwork that is more mechanical in nature has been good for me, for what I feel inspired to do and to make, because I feel like I need to make art, is the thing. Like, no matter what, even when I don't feel like making art, I need to make art because otherwise I just get crabby and depressed. So finding ways to make art that are suiting my mindset is very important to me. So yeah, it's not affecting my overall painting style, but it does affect the things that I'm choosing to paint and focus on right now. I'm also doing a lot more small and quick and fun pieces that, again, don't involve too much mental gymnastics for the composition and design of a piece. What time next Monday, Paula is asking? I'm not sure yet, so it's either going to be 1 p.m. Pacific time or 6 p.m. Pacific time. But check in with my stories in the morning, because I've been posting in the morning when I'm going to do a live to announce the timing of it. So I'll usually post something around like 10 or 11 Pacific time in the morning, and if you check that, you'll be able to see when I will be having the live session. Do I use different brush brands for different works? For example, Rosemary and Company for Botanicals, and Dragon. Yeah. So, yeah, when I'm doing botanical work, where a large part of it is going to be, as you've seen me working in this past hour, which is just sort of barely scratching with the tip of my brush, then yeah, I mostly use these Rosemary and Company size 0 brushes for this type of work. For my fantasy work, it really varies, because some areas I have lots of sweeping big washes, and so I'm going to use a wide flat brush, and other places I have larger glazes, so I'm going to use a larger round for that. But generally for the super fine detail, I usually fall back to these Rosemary and Company little size 0s, because they offer me a lot of control. And while I can get larger brushes, like a size 2 or 4 of a nice brush is going to still have an awesome point, and it's going to have the same tip point that this does, but I don't need the full large brush for that, and I'd rather not spend money to waste on that brush, to waste the brush itself, because eventually this does take its toll on the brush. And so all I want is the minimum size that I require for this type of work, and so that's why I go with size zeros a lot. And I'll switch to size 2 or 4 when I'm doing larger glaze areas. Do I try to convey worry or my mental state in my art? I sometimes do. I don't really talk about it as much. I mean, in those cases when I do, I kind of let the art speak for me. So yeah. So if you see something in my art, then yeah, it might be that. Yeah, I think in general, the biggest round I use is going to be something like this. Okay, so that's compared to, this. And then I'll use a lot of 1/2 inch or even 1 inch flats for when I'm doing super background large areas. But you can see for the entire hour that I've been painting with you watching today here, it's mostly, I think I switched maybe one time to my larger brush briefly for a glaze, but for the most part it's been this little guy. Okay, well it has been an hour right now, but thank you for joining me. I'll give you a peek at the full thing before I leave here. And this is just a piece of paper that I tape over the other half where I'm not painting, just so I don't splatter any liquid accidentally onto it. And that's what I've got so far. Got a long way to go still. But thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that, and maybe check in with me next week. All right, bye.